And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Rupert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Dominic Daniel Joseph Dempsey Lofus, who was the track-laying superintendent for the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway in the area, assigned it its name. He is believed to be originally from the River Usk area of Wales. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 2001.
Usk, located 22 kilometers east of Terrace, is bisected by the Skeena River. To Kathleen Varner, born in Kitsilas Ranch in 1908, Usk was home for over 60 years. Varner witnessed firsthand transformations of the ferry system. The ferry, which is now mainly used for residential access, was mostly used in the past by sawmill workers and miners.
The Cordillera mine was going, and they had a few men working there, and there was a sawmill, the Weissmiller's sawmill. So there were quite a few people.
It was supposed to be a 10-ton ferry, but at times we stretched its limits, I think. And it was a miserable thing in the wintertime when they were crossing the river, because the ice would back up from the Kitsilas Canyon, form a dam and would plug the river, and then it might break loose and run for a while, and at times you might have to use one or two boats to get the people back and forth.
Wintertime brought on added dangers in crossing the Skeena River.
Well, the ferry was pulled out in the fall. Yeah, when the river got too low for it to run, they'd pull out the ferry, and then you'd cross in a boat.
Yes.
When the ice came, if there was still, as long as the river wasn't frozen over, they used the boat. And if the river became frozen over, they had the cable, but it wasn't a cable car. It was just a platform with a little fence around with a couple people could stand, and that's only if you had to.
Really, that little carriage that was on the cable was meant for the Dominion government to measure the water. There was a fellow came around every three or 4 months and tested the speed of the river with an instrument. And I guess they could use it for an emergency, but it's only in later years that they put this powered cage to go across in the winter. Otherwise, people were pussyfooting across on the ice or in that boat, sometimes in pretty hazardous conditions.
I don't know really how we survived in the wintertime. The one time we started across with the boat coming home from work, it was starting to get dusk, and the river was backing up and the slush getting thicker and thicker. And finally we had to turn around, and we were lucky we were able to get back to the south side and spend the night at the sawmill, but we could have been frozen out in the middle of the river. And another time I was to walk across on the ice, and I was just a little bit late getting away from the mill, and I looked out the window and the whole river had opened up.
The fluctuating river made it difficult at times to cross, but the ferry wasn't always just for necessities.
Usk was a busy community, and I don't know, there were the 2 rooms at the school at one time, and there was always a section crew, the store, the hotel. People used to come up to Usk for the dances up above the store. And then on the 24th of May, the ball team would come up from Terrace. And, it was always risky crossing the river, wondering whether it would be flood time, which was the end of May. And then the 1st of July, the Usk ball team would come into Terrace. So there was a lot of activity in the early days.
With the changing seasons, spring weather brought on the threats of a flood. The first flood of 4 in Usk happened in 1936 when Varner was in her 20s.
We just saw that water coming up higher and higher and higher, and there was a certain amount of excitement, as well as no one was in danger, life-wise. Of course, the destruction and the mess that occurred was bad. You see, there were so many floods, 30, 36, 48, 64, and then 72.
Ferry construction evolved over the years, bringing new technology with it. As time went on, metal was used instead of wood, and cars replaced horses.
A number of people running the ferry now, where they used to only have one ferryman, and they'd pull the ferry out in the fall with the winch, sometime with the help of horses. They put timbers down, and they had slippers under the ferry, greased them, and they winched it out. And then in the early spring, there'd be some fellows go and paint it and get it ready, and put the slippers under the ferry again with some grease on them, and let the cable go, and she'd pop out into the river. Now they go with a whole bunch of equipment, and it's a great big production of machinery to do what they did by hand.
Gordon Russell now operates the Usk Reaction Ferry, which is one of 6 in the province run by BC Ferries. This 20-year-old ferry had its first major refit back in January of this year. It was dismantled, and a company from Vancouver Island did various work on it.
The pontoons were all sandblasted down and x-rayed and repainted. New decking, expanded metal decking on the walkways, and new wheelhouse. So now we've got the pride of the fleet, as we call her.
The Usk Ferry system has changed since the first one in 1913, and so has the role. Today, the ferry is mainly used for residential traffic for the few remaining residents.
Yeah, the station's gone, the store's gone, everything's too. It's only the ferries left. Yes, I think that's a good note to end on.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. In 1958, Dr. Bob Elliott achieved his vision of establishing a friendship center in Prince Rupert. With the support and funding in the United Church, a venue had been rented to house a men's hostel and a milk program for children. Let us return to the archives to see how the Friendship Center is still helping those in need.
In the tough economic times the region is going through, it's become increasingly clearer that there is a growing part of the population that needs help. Prince Rupert's Friendship House is one organization that has always been there to assist the less fortunate on the North Coast. Now it's trying to expand the role that it plays with the founding of a community homelessness project earlier this year.
Friendship House has always worked with clientele who are at risk of being homeless. And we knew there was a need here. We just needed to show the need, and we did that. We've got over about $80,000 in operating over the past few months to deliver what we're delivering.
The homelessness project covers a number of different services, including second stage housing for short-term stays, life skill courses, and a free clothing depot in Prince Rupert's downtown core. Clothing Depot has been a good indicator of the need in the community.
The big call, of course, is for beds. We've been getting a lot of clothes, records, which was interesting, and a variety of things from the community. The community support to what we're doing with the Clothing Depot has been great, and I know a lot of the people, we get about 40 to 60 people coming in a day to utilize that service.
One of the most essential services provided through the homelessness project is the second stage housing. Up until now, the service has been utilized by families that are having a hard time making ends meet and are on the verge of finding themselves on the street. While in the second stage housing, support staff work to help them find more secure accommodations. The focus of the service, though, is to keep the family together.
Say you got a parent with 2 kids or 3 kids, and they don't have I guess basically couch surfing over at someone else's place. So you'd rather keep them together instead of having one mom here with a kid and then having another kid staying with somebody else, because we'd rather have them all staying together.
Unfortunately, second stage housing is only for families, and there is an identified need for singles as well.
We get a lot of single people coming through, and it's really hard to help. So we had to turn away about 6 people so far, single people that needed a place to stay, and we just didn't have the space for them.
That's why the Friendship House is now looking at the option of establishing permanent funding for an emergency shelter.
And we think we can do that quite efficiently and effectively, as we have done with a lot of other programs here at the center. And looking at maybe an 8-bed facility and expanding around that. Of course, continuing on with the clothing depot, the community kitchens, and the barbecue, and the second stage shelter.
The City of Terrace has had an emergency shelter since 1993. A majority of its funding comes from Human Resources Development Canada. The shelter services a wide range of people, and with 7 beds, it boasts a utilization rate of 80 to 85%. It offers a diverse number of services, such as helping people get over addiction, establish better eating habits, and other life skills. The shelter's coordinator says if the Friendship House is going to establish an emergency shelter in Prince Rupert, it should take a good look at the way the BC Benefits program works and set up its services in a realistic manner.
BC Benefits provides $175 to a single person for support money. That equals out to about $6 a day. That means you have to be able to provide some form of support services for that amount of money, or to be effective. If it's going like $20 or $30 a day, that's not effective. You have to be able to look at your client base, whether it be the Aboriginal community or not, see what their needs are, and be able to effectively feed and support those persons.
Currently, the Friendship House is not only pursuing the funding to establish an emergency shelter, but is also fighting for the survival of the whole Community Homelessness Project, as its funding dries up on November 30th.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Coal bed methane is methane trapped in underground coal seams. This type of methane can be accessed using specialized drilling techniques. Generally, seams are also covered in water, which must be pumped out. Let us return to the archives with Mark Hayes.
BC's Ministry of Energy and Mines is soliciting requests for rights to explore for coal bed methane in the Northwest. It issued a letter of invitation in early October. That followed a series of open houses on the subject.
Coal bed methane is a natural gas that's held on the surface of coal. It's extracted from the coal by drilling a well, generally to depths anywhere from about 300 meters to about 1,500 meters is the optimum depth range. And the natural gas is just conventional natural gas. It can be used directly into a pipeline system once the water is stripped out. And from there it goes to your industrial or commercial consumers.
Mark Hayes and other ministry staff see coal bed methane as an opportunity to extend the petroleum boom from BC's northeast into other parts of the province. In the northwest, the potential lies in the Tuya coal fields near Telegraph Creek, the Clapan and Groundhog fields in the Bowser Basin, and around Telkwa. Organizers of this spring's Minerals North Conference in Terrace put land-based petroleum resources, including coal bed methane, prominently on their agenda, with a focus specifically on the Bowser Basin.
Okay, the Bowser Basin, it's the largest intermontane basin that we have in British Columbia, and as such, it holds significant potential for energy resources. While we're concerned about determining what those resources are, there are some fundamental things we need to know about the area that will help us figure out what they are. And those fundamental things make up what we call the geological framework of the basin. And they are some of them here in the title, the depositional, structural, and what's left out is the thermal histories of the basin. Said in another way, it's what rocks are where, what are their ages, and what happened to those since they formed.
While the Bowser Basin has attracted quite a bit of attention, government officials say companies have also been looking over old data about the Telkwa coal fields, which have some advantages.
The Telkwa coal fields are a lot more accessible, easier to get the drill rigs in, and the Telkwa coal fields have a hard coal. It's fractured, which makes it got about potential for about 130 billion cubic feet is the resource figure we put on it.
But yeah.
The downside for Telkwa is that coals are fairly shallow, and as far as coal bed methane resources go, it's of limited size.
Coal bed methane is viewed as a lot less controversial than offshore oil development. What comes out of the ground is almost pure methane, except for the water associated with it, and that can sometimes be used for irrigation, and if not, pumped back into the well. The so-called footprint of coal bed methane wells is also smaller than conventional oil and gas. Those attributes could make the approval process easier, but there are still a lot of steps which start with acquiring drilling rights.
Once the wells are drilled, generally they drill a number of exploratory wells, do tests on the wellbore, figure out where the best likely spot would be, and then they do a pilot project. And from there, they do a pilot production test, figure out how productive the coals are going to be, whether it's going to make economic sense to develop it. From that standpoint, then they go and actually start drilling the real development wells, and that process can go on for quite a few years. So I would say at a minimum, you're probably looking at 2 or 3 years. At a maximum, it might be 5 or 10 before you see activity in this area.
The BC government is working on an additional incentive for companies to explore for coal bed methane. It plans to reduce the royalties it charges for extracting the resource.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The first cyber attack took place in France in 1834, long before the internet was even thought of. By breaking into the French telegraph network, attackers were able to steal financial market data. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives with Corporal Robert Daly.
There's a misconception that this is some kind of replacement for Hollywood, almost, I mean, there's another way of becoming famous, so I'd say that's the real attraction.
Cyber criminals, more common than you may think in today's fast-paced web world, perhaps lurking behind false identities or committing other crimes that put you at risk.
The internet now, today, in today's date, is getting very different in the types of crimes that are occurring. For example, we have cybercrime, which is people out there who are trying to attack databases such as the RCMP's database, where we have suspect information, or technology-based attacks where they're trying to find out what's going on with Microsoft. Then there's the types of crimes that are fraud-related. For example, a person purchases something over the internet, they get that person's internet Visa card, and then they use it for their own means. And then there's sex crimes that go on as well. For example, a person gets on the internet and they download some child pornography, which is illegal in Canada. So types of crimes that occur are varied.
They are, of course, able to use the anonymity factor in terms of committing a crime or a mischief, if you want to call it that, without necessarily leaving the living room. They're in their own home in most cases. They're relaxed, they're in control, and they feel more powerful, I think, because of that. They're more willing to take risks rather than go out there and confront the law or, somebody that actually owns property, etc.
Protecting your personal information is the first step. Be extremely cautious if you purchase online. Give your credit card information only on a secure site. New viruses come out daily, so you should frequently update your virus scan.
The most popular one now is the combination product, firewall and virus protection combined, called Norton Internet Security. And that's generally used by small businesses or individuals to install one program suite, which will both control the access to the machine and control what occurs when the machine is actually in operation.
And email, the extremely fast and efficient method of communication, also puts you at risk.
It's probably the greatest risk. It's heavily used. It's an everyday issue for most people, and people are innately curious. They can't avoid opening something that looks as if it's going to be attractive. So you've got that problem of saying don't do this, but the natural tendency is to in fact open it, and of course the consequence in most cases, if it is virus infected, would be activating the virus.
Chat rooms can be fun and user-friendly, but can also pose a serious threat.
You should be cautious about revealing information about yourself. Perhaps use an alias, most people do that. And certainly don't let them know exactly where you are or how to reach you, etc., because who's to say what kind of follow-up situation might evolve.
For kids, the internet can be a great learning resource, but it can also open your kids to content you'd rather remain undiscovered.
The kids in most cases that I've seen are light years ahead of the parents. And in that situation, of course, they could be doing something without the knowledge of the parent that is a threat to them or puts them in harm's way.
Parents are advised to keep the computer in a main room in the home so you're able to monitor what your child is being exposed to. Teach your kids to be responsible and teach them that everything online may not be as it seems.
There's other ways of communicating on the internet now. For example, there's chat rooms and stuff that your child is susceptible to all the pedophiles of the world. Really, when you open your computer, you're opening a door to your house. And pedophiles just love to contact kids. So yeah, if your kid's in the basement in that little room, you don't know who he's communicating with or she's communicating with. And even though the person on the internet says, oh, I'm a 12-year-old boy, please come and contact me, he may be a 46-year-old man. And you'll never know unless you start talking to your children.
The competition has been fierce here at the All-Native Tourney as teams battle to get to the finals. Starting in the women's division last night, and a matchup between Galaxy Gardens, seen here in blue, and Kincolith. Galaxy continues to show their offensive strength as they take this one 72-53. That means Kincolith is gone. Galaxy Gardens is playing Metlakatla, Alaska right now to try and stay in the tourney. In senior men's action last night, Bella Bella in red controlled most of the game in its matchup against Greenville, winning 84-70. Greenville heads to the B side. Bella Bella moves on to play Heidelberg, Alaska at 9:30 tonight. Taking a look at the old fellers in Masters play, Cake Alaska in black was all over Skidegate in gold. Skidegate just couldn't seem to get it together. They dropped this one by a score of 86-65 and head to the B side of the tourney. Cake Alaska gets a shot at getting into the finals against Kincolith. The second senior men's game of the evening saw Kitimat in white matched up against Gitwinsilt, but let me tell you, it wasn't much of a matchup as the game was all Kitimat. Gitwinsilt gets eliminated by a score of 98-60. While Kitimat was putting their game to bed, the best game of the evening was going on in the arena as Bella Bella in red battled it out against New Ianch. This one went back and forth and was almost too painful to watch sometimes as both teams played some really good D, but Bella Bella was victorious in the end as New Ianch just couldn't sink the points they needed in the final seconds. The final score 53-51.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but is connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Rupert Pictou.